Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mike Moyle, District 14. I was trying to figure out how to start off this bill when I was sitting over there because this bill and this issue of property taxes has been one for a long time. And when this country was founded, one of the things that made this country great was the ability to own land. It gave you the opportunity to do your own thing and own your own land, and made it opportunity for you to be successful if you chose to put the hard work into it. In today's society, I don't think we really own our own property anymore. Think about your property taxes. If you don't pay them, they'll come take it. We're almost serfs to the government. More money, more money, more money. Property taxes have been an issue in the state of Idaho for a long time. In 1978, about the same time that California passed Prop 13, the state of Idaho passed what was called the 1% Initiative. And what the 1% Initiative did was limited the ability for a taxing district to tax more than 1% of the value of your property, and then it put a cap on the growth of the value of your property at 2% a year. The issue being that the growth at 2% a year meant that some individuals were taxed differently than others, and there was a concern about a constitutional issue. And the local governments, and you're going to hear from a lot of them today, you can see them behind me, came to the legislature and said, you've got to stop this. If you do this, it will gut our budgets. I don't know that has really been the case. I would remind you, for example, in cities, about 20% of their budgets come from property taxes. In the counties, it's about 40 to 45%. But they said it was going to gut their budgets and they wouldn't be able to provide services and the world was going to fall down and everything was going to end. So the legislature did something that I am proposing in this bill. The legislature said, let's take a step back. Let's figure out a solution. And so what the legislature did in 1979 was a freeze, which is what this House Bill 409 does. They froze the property tax portions of the budget for a year. They had an interim committee where they sat down and discussed the issue to find out a solution that would address the concerns of the citizens with their property taxes, while at the same time prevent the increasing growth in the property tax side of their taxes. The revenues going up, the budget's going up, driving up their property taxes. So this last year, the legislature had a task force, and we talked about property taxes. And one of the things we learned is a lot of us don't understand property taxes. A lot of us think that if you just raise the homeowner's exemption, for example, that your property taxes are going to go down. Not necessarily the case. Depends on where you live and the situation you're in. In fact, if you raise the property taxes, it kind of helps those in the upper class, way more those in the bottom class. In fact, there's a good sheet that's done by Representative Wisniewski that goes through it, and I would encourage you to look at it. He did a really good job of explaining why the homeowner's exemption increase would not help Idahoans. I'll give you another example. The other day, a little lady, and I've told you this story before, came up to me, a lady I've known since I was a child because I was born and raised here in Idaho, and I remember her going to her house. They were very blessed. They had a very nice home, and they had children my age, and we got to play a lot together. She's in tears. The value on her home is skyrocketed because of the new construction and the new growth going around her, and her property taxes are going through the roof. She's a widow. She can't afford this increase in property taxes. It's going to put her out of her home that she's lived in her whole life. It's not fair. It's not fair that we take people that have lived here in Idaho their whole life and drive them out of their homes because somebody moves into the neighborhood or builds a neighborhood behind their home. It's not fair. Now, there's an issue you're going to hear today in this hearing. You're going to hear about how the world's going to end, but you're going to also hear there's kind of two Idahos. And let me explain. There are some whose mill levies are low, who have very good commissioners, fire commissioners, county commissioners, city managers, city mayors, and city commissioners that are doing a good job. Their taxes aren't out of control on property. They don't have a problem. And they're going to tell you this bill's going to gut them and going to kill them. And then you have others that I think are on a spending spree. And you've heard some of the comments I've said about what's going on in Ada County. There is no reason for an 11% increase in Ada County's budget. There is no reason for a 14% increase in STAR's budget. There's no reason for this stuff. Now, you're going to hear that this bill will decimate them, especially from those who are doing it right. So let me explain something to you. And everybody listen very carefully. I'm going to tell you. A freeze does not mean that your taxes are not going to go up. They could go down. They could go up because the values are still going to do this. Doesn't mean your property taxes are going to go down. And when these individuals come up here and say, oh, you're going to kill us, by doing this, there will be no increase in our budget. That's not true either. They get 11.5% of the sales tax. We share revenue with them. You're going to hear that we have unfunded mandates on these taxing districts. That's not true either. The state sends back over $600 million a year to local governments to help pay for those mandates that we put on them. You're going to hear this stuff. It's not necessarily the truth. You're also going to hear you're probably also not going to hear about another thing. Just because we freeze the property tax portion of the budgets, they will still get the occupancy tax. So in those areas with growth, those areas that will probably complain the most, they will still get a little bit of revenue increase because every new home is going to be taxed at a certain rate. I am telling you all this in total disclosure. If you think this is going to freeze your property taxes, it may or may not. If you think it's going to lower them, it may or may not. Property tax is the most confusing dadgum thing you've ever seen, and I wish there was a way to end them. Now, as we look forward and these individuals come up here and complain about this bill, I want to remind you something. If the legislature does not act, this is what I'm saying. If the legislature does not act, the people will act. This is one of those issues that is near and dear to every Idahoan citizen, and they will get an initiative on the ballot, just like they did in 1978, and they will fix it. And this legislature will be less inclined to help those local governments out of the hole that will be created by that initiative. I am hoping that we don't go down that road, because I believe there are certain services that they provide that are important. But I am also hoping that they will come with a solution instead of stalling us out. We have halfway through this legislative session. We as legislators have sat and looked for reasons and ways forward and possible solutions to this problem with no avail. I've had many meetings with many of my local friends in the local government who have told me that anything we do in property taxes will decimate them. It won't. There's a path forward if we choose to work together. But right now, there is no hammer. There is no incentive to force them to come work with us because they think they're going to ride the clock out. They think that they can sit back, send all you guys emails, convince you that we should do nothing and give them one more year to pray about it, and nothing's going to happen, which leads credence to the effect of a possible initiative. And I would much rather we work together and find a solution versus shove it down somebody's throat. Now, when individuals come up here and say that this freeze is going to take away X number of dollars from their budget, I want you to ask yourself something. How do they know that? They're going to get exactly what they got last year. How did they make it work last year when they got that much money? And by the way, they're going to get more than they got last year because every new house they're going to get an occupancy tax on. So they're going to get more than they got last year. They're just not going to get that compound of annexations, new construction, changing classification, 3%. They're not going to get that under this bill for 1 year. And hopefully then we can have an interim committee. We can all sit down and discuss this. I'll sit down and quit ranting. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I look forward to the comments that are made. And I would encourage the committee members to think about one thing. Think about the widow lady through her no actions of her own. It's not her fault. She's being forced out of a home she's lived in her whole life. That is wrong. And I hope you can help me fix the problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll stand for questions.